James Dean is the only actor in Hollywood history to become a superstar by playing just three leading roles in films. Strangely, the most significant event in Jimmy's short and tumultuous life was his death. On September 30th, 1955, at the intersection of two desert roads, James Dean's car, a silver Porsche Spyder 550, collided at a speed of 110 miles per hour with a Ford that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. James Dean died, but a legend was born. Live fast, die young. That was his motto. The crash, which happened on a clear September evening, was considered by many to be a sophisticated suicide. But there was no suicide. It was a duel with death, and Dean lost. He was handsome and restless. He was passionate about car racing, bullfighting, and motorcycles. He dreamed of taking everything life had to offer. He carried within him something of both a nihilist rebel and a romantic cowboy. For the youth of the 1950s, he was a revelation. The screen had long been filled with dull, proper superheroes who had grown tiresome. It was no surprise that after his first major role in the film East of Eden, Dean became popular. Millions of teenagers imitated his character. Tousled hair, a red windbreaker, rolled-up jeans, a cigarette in hand, and a crooked smile. In real life, Jimmy was neither the romantic hero nor the rebel that Hollywood portrayed him to be. More than anything, he was afraid of dying. The fear of death lived in him from childhood. James Dean's parents, Wynton and Mildred, met at a dance and married 4 months later. On February 8, 1931, James Byron Dean was born. His middle name was given in honor of the family's best friend. Later, to add romance to Dean's legend, some biographers claimed that he was named Byron after the early deceased poet. Mildred was an extraordinarily caring mother. Her attachment to her son seemed abnormal to many. The boy barely socialized with anyone but her. They built a puppet theater together and performed plays they had written themselves. At night, Jimmy would place a piece of paper with a written wish under his pillow. Mildred, like a kind fairy, would quietly take it at night, and by the next day, whatever her son had wished for would come true. They lived happily in their magical world. Jimmy thought it would always be this way, and did not suspect that fate would soon deal him a cruel blow. In the spring of 1940, Mildred was diagnosed with late-stage cancer. She could no longer devote as much attention to Jimmy as before. Little Jimmy could not understand what was happening, why his mother no longer loved him. For the first time, he felt betrayed. He could not forgive his mother for her illness. Mildred died in front of Jimmy. The family was left penniless. All their savings had been spent on medicine. Wynton Dean could not accompany his wife's body to her hometown of Fairmont. Instead, 9-year-old Jimmy and his grandmother took the coffin. She later recalled that Jimmy would get off the train at every station to check that the coffin was still there. The night before the funeral, the coffin stood in his aunt's house. Late at night, Jimmy snuck to his mother's body and cut a lock of her hair. He would keep this lock under his pillow for a long time. Jimmy changed profoundly. His mother's death became a nightmare and obsession for him. Crying at her grave, Jimmy almost daily repeated, "I am afraid of death," he clarified. Dean did not just fear death. He was fascinated by it. A pastor in Fairmont once devoted much effort to convincing the boy of the immortality of the soul. Jimmy had a natural talent for acting, so he behaved in a way that made the Holy Father believe his sermons were successful. In reality, James Dean did not gain any faith. Alone, he remained the same frightened, lonely boy who had accompanied his mother's body from Santa Monica to Fairmont. Prayers did not help. At the age of 13, Dean first challenged death. His uncle had given him a brand new motorcycle. Jimmy raced wildly through the winding streets of his town. Friends and neighbors were horrified and told him he would break his neck one day. After school, Jimmy studied acting and, at 21, received his first serious role on Broadway. But the play was canceled shortly after its premiere, and Dean temporarily gave up theater. He later worked in television, but without much success. Attempts to earn money in other ways, selling movie tickets or parking cars, ended badly. Jimmy was hot-tempered and rude, and he would be fired from each new job within a week. Jimmy found it difficult to get along with people. Even in school, he had a reputation as a withdrawn, gloomy boy. At parties and lively gatherings, he preferred to stay apart. For his prom, he went alone, without a date, an unheard-of situation for an American teenager. His relationships with girls were equally unsuccessful. No girlfriend lasted more than a month. He dated dancer Dizzy Sheridan, which ended in a scandal and breakup. He briefly had a serious relationship with Pier Angeli. He was even ready to marry her. But she changed her mind at the last moment and married a theater producer. Jimmy drove to the church where the ceremony took place but did not enter. He sat at the door, furiously twisting the throttle of his motorcycle. The roar of the engine drowned out the vows of fidelity his former love was giving. Neither women nor friends could give Jimmy the love he craved. Many who knew him well believed that no living person truly interested him. His only friend became a small Siamese kitten, a gift from Elizabeth Taylor on the set of Giant. Jimmy cared for the kitten tenderly, even asking to leave filming to feed it at home. Only this kitten could understand him. In early 1954, Dean received an invitation to star in the film East of Eden and moved to Hollywood. All his belongings fit into a paper bag. In it, he carried his two favorite books, The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and Death in the Afternoon by Ernest Hemingway. He often repeated the words of the old fox. One sees clearly only with the heart. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Perhaps Dean felt like the little prince, abandoned on a strange planet. Who knows? Dean's peculiar behavior was immediately noticeable. Before introducing him to the film crew, director Elia Kazan had to warn everyone about the newcomer's unpredictability. You are about to meet a very unusual guy. He is very strange, but no matter what he seems to you, on screen, Jimmy is pure gold. East of Eden premiered with great pomp. Marilyn Monroe was even invited to play a ticket taker, but Dean simply did not show up. Critics were unsure how to react to the film, but audiences loved East of Eden, and James Dean became a star. The first thing he did with his $700 paycheck was to buy a used racing car. Fast driving remained his greatest passion. He participated in 3 races and won 2 of them. He drove a new Porsche super speedster to the finish line. Later, Dean traded this car for a Porsche Spyder, the vehicle that would play such a fateful, tragic role in his life. 1955, Jimmy's final year, approached, and his duel with death neared its climax. In the winter, he returned to Fairmont for the last time. With him came Life magazine photographer Dennis Stock, assigned to take a series of photos of Dean. While walking through the town, they entered a local store selling everything from nails to coffins. Seeing the coffins, Dean became unusually animated. He climbed into a narrow redwood coffin and asked Dennis to photograph him. I was terrified, Stock later recalled. I tried to refuse, but he insisted and almost forced me. There was something morbid, abnormal in all of this. Dean's popularity in America grew like a snowball. He often gave interviews, and teenagers nationwide went wild over his strange statements. A journalist once asked him, "What do you respect the most?" Without hesitation, the actor replied, "Death, of course. Death is the only thing left to respect. It is an inevitable, absolute truth. In it lies all the grandeur of man. Everything else is questionable." Dean dreamed of greatness. Death, as part of that grandeur, took up more and more space in his life. He began collecting stories of famous people's deaths, earning the nickname "Fan of Dead Stars." In these grim tales, Jimmy saw signs only he could decipher, seeking patterns and systems. For instance, he noticed a mystical connection between his last name starting with the letter D and the word death. Part of his death cult included his fascination with bullfighting. His guide became Hemingway's Death in the Afternoon. Dean made many notes in the book. He highlighted a passage. "Now that the war is over, the only place where one can observe life and death, true violent death, remains the bullfight." He also included newspaper clippings of deceased toreros with their photographs. Among these clippings, he inserted a typewritten excerpt from a poem by Federico Garcia Lorca dedicated to a fallen bullfighter. At 5 in the afternoon, it happened precisely at 5 in the afternoon. Everything else is death and nothing else. At 5 in the afternoon. Biographers would spend years trying to determine where Dean discovered this poem, why he retyped it, and why he always carried it with him. The poem would take on a grim sense of inevitability after Jimmy Dean died on September 30th, 1955, at 5 in the afternoon. Did Dean know the ending would come so soon? He had finished filming the most famous of his 3 movies, Rebel Without a Cause, and had begun work on Giant. His next project was a film with the symbolic title Somebody Up There Likes Me, but Dean would not live to see it. During the filming of Giant, producers forbade him from racing. He became furious, but had no choice but to obey. Exactly 13 days before his death, Dean filmed a 30-second public service announcement about road safety. "Remember," Jimmy said earnestly on screen, "be careful on the roads. The life you save may be mine." After the accident, this short clip would be replayed countless times on nearly every American television channel. Amid the heartbroken cries of his fans, Jimmy's words would echo again and again. "The life you save may be mine." Dean bought his Porsche Spyder on September 21st and nicknamed it Little Bastard. The next day, filming for Giant ended, lifting the ban on racing. In Salinas, the next race was scheduled, and Jimmy could hardly wait for the first day of competition. The car was brand new and needed to be broken in, but there was no time. Rolf, Dean's mechanic, angrily warned him. The car was not ready. Participating in the race was sheer madness. Dean decided to test drive his Bastard himself. Instead of sending the car ahead to the racetrack, he drove it to Salinas. Before leaving, the film crew threw a party for Dean. He chatted happily with friends and eagerly discussed his future plans. Later, meticulous biographers noted that he told different stories to each friend. To Elizabeth Taylor, he said he planned to seriously pursue television. To Dennis Hopper, he said he wanted a short break from work. To the director, he passionately described his upcoming film role. It is now clear that none of these plans were real. Did Dean sense this himself? Did he realize that the road to Salinas would become a highway to nowhere for him? The day before the trip, Dean called friends and acquaintances to invite them to join him. By a strange coincidence, everyone had urgent matters that day, and no one could go with him. Only his loyal mechanic Rolf accompanied him. They set off early. Despite Rolf's warnings, Dean did not slow below 100 miles per hour. By noon, They were stopped by highway patrol, as usual receiving a ticket. After joking with the officer, Jimmy drove on. The day was sunny, and the highway was empty. They headed west. The little bastard handled the road perfectly. By 5 o'clock, the setting sun struck his eyes. At that moment, Dean noticed a Ford ahead, turning left. Be careful," warned Rolf. Dean's last words, spoken in response, were, "Don't worry, this guy sees us." The Ford only lightly clipped Dean's car. But for the fragile Porsche, it was enough. It was thrown onto the roadside, flipped several times, and slammed to the ground. Rolf, unbuckled, was thrown clear and survived. Dean did not. When his body was recovered from the wreckage, his face was completely unscathed. The little bastard had killed its owner, piercing his chest just like an enraged bull goring a hapless torero. Jimmy had dreamed of facing death one-on-one, like a bullfighter. His wish was fulfilled. Every book about James Dean's legend lists the warning signs that fate supposedly sent him, trying to stop him. The first, when he was forbidden to race. The second, when he bought a new car and was advised to break it in on a test track. The third and final, when the patrol stopped Dean for speeding. All of this happened just 4 hours before the tragedy. 23-year-old student Donald Turnupseed, who was driving the ill-fated Ford that day, immediately became famous. He was barely injured in the accident, but remained in shock for a long time. Journalists tried to uncover the reasons behind the crash at the intersection of 466th and 41st Roads. The strangest thing was that Donald insisted on one version. "I did not see him. There was no car on the highway." Many still believe he was telling the truth, no matter how unbelievable it seems. Today, the James Dean Museum in Fairmont generates more revenue than Dean earned during his entire career. A few years ago, a special postage stamp featuring Jimmy's portrait was issued. A film about his life is in preparation. The death cult thrives. Paradoxically, in the end, Dean did win this duel. He achieved everything he wanted. He lived fast, died young, and became great after his death. However, James Dean did not believe in the afterlife, so he would never know that he had triumphed. The morning after the accident, one of Dean's friends, remembering the orphaned kitten, decided to take it in. However, Jimmy's apartment was empty. On the day of his owner's death, the kitten mysteriously disappeared. No one has seen it since.